Good morning. It's Pop again. Let me just move this mic over here. Sorry. Um, Today is Popcast 20, I'm sorry, 70, and it's called Nature's Wisdom Part 20. All right, now let's see. The mic is a lot closer, and that should be better. All right. So I wanted to continue with a few examples to finish up this discussion of how difficult it is to face social problems, even when we see them as common problems to be faced together. So I had been talking in recent days about those years in the 60s when I was active in my church. And I mentioned that I was on the parish council and that one of the issues of those days was birth control. So the Pope had issued a fairly restrictive uh, document about the church's position, and many people were just ignoring it, and most young Catholics were using some form of artificial birth control because they didn't want too many children. Um, My wife and I were doing so. We already had three children. We were in our early 20s, and it seemed like enough. And so the local bishop, who was a real reactionary, uh, wrote and had printed and distributed all throughout the diocese a pamphlet espousing a very strict position against any means of birth control except for um, the rhythm method, which is to say hardly any birth control at all, consistent with an appreciation of human sexuality. You know, it's kind of hard to expect men who've never lived with women to have any idea at all of what they're talking about when they try to consider matters between men and women. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of who struck John about that. That's my point of view, and I would be um, I would be less than honest if I didn't say I felt that way. Um, Regardless, so this particular Sunday, several large boxes were delivered to the parish. Um, and as I said, we had a little small chapel in Bowie, up on a hill where it had been built in the 1700s, and we used that for some masses, and we also were using a movie theater, and eventually we built, our own big church. So, but as I recall, the particular time, it was Sunday that these birth control pamphlets were distributed by the bishop. We were still using this little chapel, and they were delivered to the back of the chapel. So the chairman of the parish council and myself decided that we just couldn't tolerate the really stupid, ideas in those pamphlets being forced on the members of our parish. So we stole them. And we just put them in our car, and we eventually took them to a dumpster. Um, no harm, no foul. It was, the Archbishop's uh, narrow point of view was well known to all, but it was just too offensive for us to be tolerating our parish being spoken to in that way. It was just too stupid for words. So I give this as an example of how really hard it is to avoid seeing people who you differ from in ideas about how we should make social arrangements, to avoid seeing them as stupid. And obviously, I failed. Uh, I saw the Archbishop as a narrow-minded, stupid individual who really shouldn't be permitted to walk and talk without a guardian. And of course, I'm wrong, terribly wrong. And my attitude is at the heart of why the Great Divide exists. Um, we, on both sides of the Great Divide, have a strong sense that the other side is wrong. And with our sense comes a great indignation. Um, in the in the case of people on my side of the divide, the word stupid, just comes to mind so quickly, and the sense of these people as being stupid is just so strong, and it's so wrong. It just couldn't be more wrong. Um, it's just type bias coming out. There's openness. It's a wonderful thing, and nature has given some of it to all of us, and more to some and less to others. Um, Nature's wisdom is to have difference, and it's a complete failure of appreciation of nature's wisdom to consider people who are different from you about openness as somehow deficient and stupid, and it's just wrong, and it's fundamentally wrong. It's profoundly wrong. It's deeply built into our entire attitude towards ourselves and each other, and it needs to be exposed for what it is. It's a very understandable human flaw that is very much in the way of our living nature's wisdom, of our facing our social arrangement problems together as a common problem. It's like two people who aren't even going to counseling because they're so convinced the other one is too unworthy of them to be worth going to counseling with. Um, it's that blind dislike you take to somebody you don't really know, based on some casual sentence or other phrase you overheard him say to somebody else under circumstances where you have no idea how much it reflects about him. But you've decided you know all you need to know to dislike him. And I mean, we've all done that. And it cuts both ways. So the other side of the Great Divide often very correctly feels that their attitudes, which are characteristically more uh, uh, the kind uh, of wisdom that has chosen to believe that there is an external God and that that God is a person, and to have uh, less openness about it than the people on the other side of the divide think they should have. But the point is, nature in its wisdom has given people more or less differences of openness about these important matters. So, and for a good reason. And so it's incumbent on all of us to appreciate this openness divide is part of nature's wisdom, and it is not a basis for a divide. So many of the people on one side feel like their religious belief is dismissed by the other side as being somehow unintelligent, either because the other side is hostilely atheistic or agnostic, or the other side includes lots of believers, as it does, but their beliefs are more subtle, more sophisticated, more open, and they're unable to appreciate, the more traditional, more closed, more typical beliefs that are characteristic of one side of the Great Divide. Bear in mind, this characterization I'm using for one side or the other, the Great Divide, is very flawed. It's hardly useful. It's just that it's the best tool we have to be able to talk about what's going on between us. It isn't the case that everybody on one side of the divide has an identical personality, an identical psychology, and an identical set of religious beliefs. Nor on the other side, the same is not true as well. But you have to use generalizations to talk about an event that is so complex and important that it must be talked about. And it is so complex that it's almost impossible to be honest about it. If you went on and on about its subtlety, you'd have to take a half an hour to describe every time you wanted to bring up anything, the two sides. Well, side A, which includes and then go on for about 20 minutes, and side B, which includes and go on for 20 minutes, and you'd be coming closer to it, but, we can't do that. We need a couple of words or phrases that fit in the short sentence to talk about the two sides. So forgive me, I recognize that I'm generalizing and in a way that loses a lot of nuance and subtlety. So in some regards, what I'm doing is making things worse. And I understand that, but I don't have any choice. If we want to talk about it, we have to generalize and simplify. We just need to kind of remember that that's what we're doing. The point being that you can characterize the two sides as being fundamentally disapproving of the other. And in one case, because the more open people are viewed with disdain and dismissiveness, the less open people. And on the other case, the people on one side of the divide are more characteristically involved in fairly traditional middle class religion, and they feel very defensive about it because the other side is being offensive about it. They want some kind of far more subtle and sophisticated and open views about religion and God. Well, if you live on one side of the divide, open and sophisticated is not your middle name. It's just not you. And you have a right to be you without being crapped on for it by the other half of people who, in the room who think you should be different. So that's the starting point. If nature has chosen to use difference for a reason, and we can see from evolution that it's a very serious reason, that the species has a much better chance of surviving whatever might come next, which includes apparently a whole host of things, if it has a variety of skills. And so the skills take the form of psychological differences. And it's really, really hard to appreciate psychological difference. That's what, all of Myers-Briggs and the whole thing, psychological type and temperament that psychologists have been talking about now for, let's see, Jung's original book is 2 years short of 100 years ago. And Myers-Briggs started doing her work in the 40s and published in the late 50s or early 60s. So, 60 years ago. And then there's all kinds of people that have, gotten into the conversation later. A lot of testing, a lot of work. But it's still just beginning to scratch the surface of ordinary people's lives. And they're not taking it yet as fully as we need to out into the daily arena for the Great Divide. And essentially, that's what I'm doing. I'm saying, let's use psychological type for its insights into nature's wisdom. It helps support and explain nature's wisdom. And then let's try and live it, which means I need to stop thinking of people as dumb or stupid who have a different position than mine on birth control for young people, or on sexuality for married couples, or for young people in love. And I find it extremely difficult. I mean, it's a challenge. And so I'm going to safely assume, I believe, that people who are somewhat more traditional, um, and who typically uh, pay a lot more attention than I do to what clergy or other religious leaders are preaching, uh, or establishing as dogma, or as just the ordinary aspects of our religious lives, that many of those people have quite different opinions than I do about matters of sex, sexuality, birth control, and of course abortion. I have a hard time talking about abortion because, thank goodness, I've never been involved in one. But I know people that have, and it can be emotionally devastating. And it's, it's just so personal, and the emotions are so raw. I don't find that I have anything to contribute to the conversation. I know that there are lots of people who have strong opinions. Uh, my personal opinion is I'm just glad I never had to make a decision about it. I think I would probably strongly encourage my beloved not to do that, and not to have an abortion, to put the baby up for adoption if wasn't able to raise it. But that's very personal, and circumstances, might be arguing against that. And I'm not a woman who has to make that choice. Uh, and I thank goodness that I've never been the male involved in a relationship where that choice had to be made. Um, when my wife and I, at the time, not just young lovers, not married, found out that we were going to have a baby, we were kind of overjoyed, and went and made our lives together. And I'm I was really among the best moments of my life to hear that we were going to have a baby, because I just knew we'd use that opportunity to go make a life together. And it's we celebrated our 59th anniversary last month, and I'm already planning the celebration for our 60th. So I don't even want to talk about that. Um, so, one more thing. I used to make banners and appear at church with banners, and they were both affirming, key aspects of our religious belief, but they were also um, essentially appealing to anti-Vietnam War. That I felt that the original decision to go to war there was uh, something I reluctantly supported, because I so regarded the President Kennedy. But it didn't take long to realize that the amount of uh, price that was being paid, and the harm that was being inflicted on our soldiers and on the Vietnamese was all out of proportion to the benefit, in my opinion, at the time. Um, in all honesty, don't have enough knowledge in my older age to justify a decision as to whether or not, in geopolitical terms, we got enough for that war to have made it a good choice. There's arguments pro and con, and I'm not really up to that task. So I'd leave it. But at the time, in the later 60s, I became quite opposed to the war. And I truly despised Nixon. And again, this is wrong on my part. Um, but I'm just telling you the truth about how I felt. Um, and so anything he was for, I was against. And it wouldn't matter if he was struggling in the surf to save Mother Teresa from drowning. I still would have accused him of, of finding some way to turn it to personal gain. I just really didn't like him. So, okay, but I will say that were he alive today, I'd apologize because he looks a lot better than in the light of history than he did at that time. Um, so the other people, most of the parishioners didn't really appreciate my standing out, in the lobby of the movie theater with banners that were talking about, its anti-war things. And I always found a Christian motif, to talk about the war. Again, at the time, if you remember, I was very, very pure at heart in my Christianity as far as I was concerned. And I had a very high standard that I thought I and everyone else should live up to. So I guess I was probably pretty obnoxious, but I thought I was doing the right thing. And, my general theory is you got to do what you think you got to do up to a point. And if you later regret it, then that's all right. It's a lot better than not doing what you think you should do, except in the case of violence, as I spoke of a couple of days ago. But I had one particular banner that I want to mention. It was very, very large, and I was pleased to make it. And it was based on a saying from somebody whose name I can't remember, but I think it was Sister Mary Carita. I've tried to look her up in Wikipedia and in Google, and she didn't make the cut. I guess she was before the time and not, a Kardashian, so she didn't make the cut. But it was joy is the echo of God's love in us. And I still think that's true. My my Jungian interpretation of God in love is that what we can all agree on, nature's wisdom about it, is that there's this very strong sense in our psychology that almost all of us personify, um, that there's a creative goodness at work in the world, and it's in us as well, and calls us to live in fruitful relation to each other, to be a gift to each other. And that joy, which is a kind of, associated with the energy of hope, is our psychological reaction to that psychological reality in us. So I still very much think that's true. Um, and so if anybody remembers who was the author of that phrase, I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to quit for now. I've got a lot more to talk about. Where do we go from here? And there's a lot more to talk about the wrongness of seeing other people as idiots, as fools, and just because there's essentially a type bias built into all of us. And there's an awful lot of examples from both sides of the Great Divide that I was able to think of in 20 minutes of trying. And so see you tomorrow. We'll resume. Take care. Bye-bye.